Let's Get To presents
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Here come the Astros, burning with desire. Here come the Astros, breathing orange fire. Here come the Astros, with winning on their mind. Here come the Astros, number one every time. Go, go, Astros. We want Houston! We want Houston! Alvarez hits a high drive, center field. Beerling's back! This game is turned upside down!
And the pitch is lifted to right by Castellanos. Long run for Tucker over toward the line and foul territory. Makes the catch, and the Houston Astros do it again. 2022 World Series champions.
And now, Go Astros. Astros baseball from three guys who've been there since Art Howe had hair.
Here come the Astros, breathing orange fire. Here come the Astros.
And welcome everybody to the 100th episode of Go Astros. And those of you who follow me on Twitter, and I know that you do, thought I was in Alaska, but in fact, I have re-enlisted. I've joined the Imperial Air Force because the Astros have driven me crazy. I might as well do that. Brian's here. Hi, Brian. Congrats. Go Tigers.
Go Tigers. A positive thought for both of us. My team went 11-2 in the postseason, both in October and in June. It's been a good 12 months of playoff baseball for me.
Maybe that continues to 16 months. Good morning, Andy.
Morning.
Guys, and I'll be honest, a lot of that was driven by being tired, touring Alaska, great time. But I think had what might be considered my very first sort of Twitter meltdown during Sunday's game. Would you say that was my first Twitter meltdown, Andy, or close to it?
Your first in a while about Astros. I have seen other things about other teams.
Politics can get me going too, yeah.
Politics or a certain burnt orange team that plays for a small secular school on the Colorado
Yeah, that'll happen
during the football seasons.
What I think is interesting about all of this is, and I want to actually hit Brian first because he's the political scientist on the show, but it feels like we have entered a microcosm of political discourse when it comes to Astros fans. You are either pro Dusty or you are anti Dusty, and neither the twain shall meet. And I think Dusty's a good manager. Has Dusty cost us some wins this year? Absolutely. Some of those maybe beyond his control, but some things he could have. Brian, overall, what is your assessment of our state as a fan base with this topic?
I mean, well, I think there are two things to note here. The Astros are half a game out of being in the playoffs, and we're all at each other's throats, which is an indication of how spoiled we are by the last 6 seasons. So, that just kind of is, right? You expect to be not a half game behind the playoffs, but multiple games in, as we have been pretty much every season, again, for the last 6 years. 2, they're in a really bad period right now. And it's continued over a period of time. It is particularly driven home by not having Yordan Alvarez in the lineup, and this team is very dependent on one guy, and they really need him to get back. So everyone light a candle for Yordan's oblique. And then they've regressed in other places, both in the rotation and in the lineup, particularly in the lineup. So they're not scoring a lot of runs, and that's exacerbating a lot of their other issues. Every game is a close game because when you don't score a lot of runs and you don't give up a lot of runs, you play a lot of low-scoring games in which, there are only a handful of runs separating the team. That's putting extra pressure on the bullpen and meaning that, they kind of have to use Rafael Montero, who, here's a fun fact about Sunday. I don't think a lot of people realize we won the game.
We're going to get to Montero here in a second.
Yeah, it's true. On the Dusty issue, managers, particularly those of us who are on social media, but basically we put too much into the tactical moves that managers make. And they can have an effect, but the effects are pretty modest. The real job of managers is to manage the men, to manage the egos and personalities of the 26 men in the clubhouse and the assorted people who are involved in that. That's been Dusty's strength throughout his career. You could argue that, it hasn't been the best month for sort of the intensity of the team, but the overall body of work from Dusty Baker, including this year, is nothing to make a note of. Final important point to make, since I'm the sabermetric guy, managers affect a couple wins. That's sort of what the research shows. You can have a great manager who makes all these tactical moves and you get a couple wins out of that, which could be really valuable in a close pennant race, but it is not the difference between, being 8 games out in the AL West last year to where they are this year.
Andy, I want you to take all of that with also the added topic of, Brian, and we have talked about on Twitter that the team is unlucky in ways this year that they were lucky in previous years. But are they the luckiest of all that they've actually played such dog shit baseball, but are still where we wanted them to be at the All-Star break until everybody came healthy? They're within 5 games. Take that and take the Dusty thing, that thing, and then where we are and sort of wrap up or sum up where the season's been so far.
I mean, the people who hate Dusty are the people who have always hated Dusty. They just weren't allowed to talk about it last year because what were you going to say? They weren't leading the division by double digits at this point.
They won in spite of him, bro.
Yeah, I mean, it's asinine, like a lot of things that our fan base is melting down about right now. If you want to list out the litany of problems the Astros have had in the 2023 season, Dusty Baker's about 7th on that list. And to Brian's point, the things he does or doesn't do are minimally effective on our actual results in the game. I focus a lot more on the fact that we've blown 12 saves this year. 12 saves, you convert half of those, you're in first place. That's just not who we are this year. Some of that is on Montero and Jim Crane thinking he was smarter than Dusty Baker too, thinking he was smarter than all of baseball and extending Rafael Montero. But I don't know that anybody could have predicted, and Brian, please prove me wrong, whatever numbers you have, not a fall from grace for a member of the bullpen, but the staggering fall from grace where he is arguably the worst reliever in Major League Baseball, at least in the top 9. If you want to look at WAR, I think he was a -1 right now when I looked yesterday. There is a pitcher on the A's that's worse, though. So
it's interesting because at one point we had the worst hitter in baseball and the worst relief pitcher in baseball. Let's talk Montero. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, and that's kind of just what we're grasping at straws when if you take everything else that's gone wrong, if our bullpen performed the way we expected them to, you could absorb all of those issues and nobody would have the complaints they're having outside of Texas would be a half game back of us rather than us trailing them by 5.5 or 5 games. What I haven't even looked this morning. It's also been a crappy month. We're 10-13. It's the first losing month that the Astros have had in a really, really long time. They have to win the next 4 in a row to avoid that distinction. And, the Cardinals are certainly capable of winning this series because we've lost to all sorts of teams this month. And then we've got 3 against the Rangers that are really going to kind of determine a lot of what we're going to feel about this first half of the season, I think. So the good news is there's still a lot of baseball left to be played, but this Astros team, as it's currently constructed, has some real flaws. But to the original question, Dusty Baker's 7th or 8th on that list of flaws.
There are a couple of areas where I think Dusty Baker kind of does need to own some things. And I'm going to push back on the concept of having to use Montero. I absolutely think you have to use Montero. However, he said before the game yesterday that we're going to have to hide him for a while. And so it seems to me, if you know that's what you have to do, you don't hide him in the 8th inning. If you're going to hide him in that game, you hide him where you put Maton so you have time to recover. Or you say we're going to hide him and we're going to let Seth Martinez pitch earlier, whether it's a better or worse option. Dusty supposedly, I mean, not supposedly, Dusty's been around a long enough time to know that sometimes players got to play their way back. I don't think it does anything. I don't think it does anything good for Montero or that team to hide him in the 8th inning. And I also don't think it does. I know he doesn't care about the fan base, but at the end of the day, there needs to be some consideration for the fact that we are the ones who drive all of this train. And you don't have to do what you're telling us to do, but you don't have to be smug about it. And I think I'm starting to get really irritated about that part of it, which I get is childish. Andy, we'll start with you first on this one as we work our way around. I mean, do you see where I'm coming from on if your decision is to hide, we give rest days when rest days maybe aren't the most convenient. If your decision is to hide Montero, then really hide him.
Some of the things he said to me are kind of curious about, we've all heard we need to hide him. He needs to figure out his stuff, but we're going to try to not put him in leverage situations. Then in 2 days later, you're putting him in leverage situations. That to me is weird. Some of that is driven by the fact that the Astros are limited to carry, like every other team, 13 pitchers. That's the rule. So, but some of the other things he said when he's put Montero in, Montero's blown a game or given up a lead or had a bad outing. Well, I was holding back somebody else in case we went to extras. You can't play for extras in the 8th inning. And that's a really
especially
weird...
when your team is 0-7 in extra innings.
Well, I mean, we won one finally, I think.
We're 1-7.
Yeah.
1-7.
But it's a really weird consideration that he's making. And if there are guys on the roster you don't trust to pitch, they shouldn't be on the roster. Montero's a situation where he has no options, where we've invested a lot of money in him. He's not getting DFA'd. I don't know. I was trying to find the average number of DFAs in a season off a major league roster, and it's like less than 24 over the course of an entire season. If you would look at Astros Twitter, we have DFA'd our entire team except for Yordan Alvarez. And I found somebody yesterday complaining that Yordan's made of glass and how could we trust him? So, I mean, literally you can find somebody who hates every one of our players that is supposedly a fan. But the bullpen is the biggest thing holding this team back right now. And I don't know what the fix is, because it is exactly the bullpen we had last year that was the strength of the team. So do you hope they're going to start performing, or do you hope Dana Brown is paying attention enough to, we need to make some changes? And if you don't trust Ryan Stanek in leverage situations, and you don't trust Rafael Montero in leverage situations, you're now down to like 3 guys you could pitch in a leverage situation.
And when you're playing, like to Brian's point,
and you're not scoring runs, there's a lot of leverage situations. So it's I'm encouraged that Presley seems to have figured out that he can't keep throwing sliders to everybody 75% of the time. That seems to have fixed itself. I don't know if the fix is that easy for some of our other guys that we're concerned about. Based on last year, I'd like to give Seth Martinez more of a role in some of those situations, because he at least throws strikes, which is not always what Montero and some of the other guys are doing. But if it's not Martinez, then it has to be somebody else. And it looks like it has to be somebody else outside the organization, because there is nothing in AAA. And that is one of the other things that's just frustrating the hell of me. There's got to be somebody better sitting in Sugarland. There's not. If there were, they'd be playing. There's just not. We have a lack of depth organizationally, not just at the major league roster, in a lot of critical areas. First base being one of them that we saw earlier, and evidently pitching now, especially in the bullpen.
Well, and Brian, when Andy pulled up the whole bullpen numbers, I was actually kind of buoyed by that, because I do think the bullpen will eventually get right. Montero, this has been Montero's career. He's got a great year and then a not so good year. I'm not ready to throw the baby out with the bathwater in this particular situation. I do think hiding him for a while might be the best idea. But I want you to weigh in on that, Brian. But I also want you to add to the caveat of, you've also often said that we're getting the same thing with Yadier Diaz. Yadier Diaz is one of the best hitters on the team right now and did not play in an extra inning game on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, there are 2 points I want to make about the bullpen. One is, I think we can all agree Seth Martinez should be ahead of Rafael Montero on the pecking order. And that's they are trying to give Rafael Montero less appearances than some of the other guys. But again, you got to use these guys that have been better off using, had they gotten Martinez the shutout inning in the 8th, they wouldn't have needed to pitch him in the 11th.
And I know that they want Martinez to be the multi-inning guy, but his numbers suggest he's a very good first inning guy, and he kind of starts to precipitously fall off.
They all kind of do. On the bullpen here, I looked up these numbers. These are as of Saturday, so they don't include Sunday's numbers, but they're first in the majors in K percentage. They're third in K minus walk percentage. They walk a lot of guys, but they strike out a lot of guys. They're fourth best in home runs per 9 innings, seventh best in FWAR, but win probability added, they're 23rd at negative 0.91. And they have blown the 9th most saves in baseball, which is to say, over the long run, those WPA, those win probability added and blown save numbers should get better. On the other hand, I'd really like them to get better tonight in St. Louis. We play baseball in the long run, but we also play it every day. And there's obviously a tension between that. Dusty's going to rest guys, and there's a handful of guys he plays every day, mostly veteran guys. And Jeremy Pena's worked his way into that. He hasn't developed that trust of Yainer Diaz yet, but in the current lineup, where they'd be a lot better off with Yainer Diaz playing a lot more. He is playing more in recent days. He's playing the DH a lot, and I'm happy to see that they played him this weekend as the DH while Maldi's the catcher. If you're not going to pinch hit for Maldi until the last inning, which is the pattern of how they're pinching Maldonado, there's no reason not to play your other catcher at DH.
No, I think you're exactly right. Speaking of young guys, and we'll start Ryan on you on this one. Has Corey Julks ever learned to run bases? Because I don't know what that was, but that was not pretty.
It's not a good advertisement for a University of Houston education, I guess. But it happened to the best of us.
Right. Andy, I imagined you melting down with that whole thing.
No, and it's just how the season's gone. One of the things that you hang around baseball long enough, you realize that guys who are really fast don't get coached a lot on base running because they're really fast, and it makes up for a lot of sins. Older Astros fans will remember guys like Glenn Barker, who would get put in as a pinch runner and immediately get thrown out almost every time he got put in as a pinch runner because he didn't understand how to steal a base.
Right.
I know we don't talk about Jeff Bagwell anymore, but he was an excellent base runner, although he was precipitously slow because he understood how to read a pitch.
Kyle Tucker has a little bit that in him. He's not super fast, but he knows how to steal a base.
Yeah, and so it is definitely a learned skill. Speed certainly helps, but the players who are smart and fast when it comes to base running are few and far in between, and we can usually name them. They're called Lou Brock or Ricky Henderson. There's just so much about this lineup, and Julks isn't part of the. I don't understand if we're going to talk about Dusty, which seems to be one of the themes. I don't understand why Yainer Diaz is not playing every day in some capacity. I don't understand why Chas McCormick is in some sort of weird rotation in center field because Jake Myers has been putrid outside of 2 weeks this season.
The 2 weeks we fixed him, and that was it.
Yeah, but this last month he is batting a robust 169 with a 354 slugging and a 250 on base percentage. But he has played just as many games as Chas, who in the same month has a 938 OPS. The defensive drop-off is not great enough to justify that gap in offense. And
especially for as much as Jake might be able to get to some balls, he doesn't have an arm. So I don't know.
Well, but I think you can put a lineup together that will score runs if you just sit with that lineup. And this is not giving Altuve a day off on a Sunday or something like that. I understand the need for that, and we've got players that should be able to, bridge that gap for a game or two. But you've got two of your best hitters who are in a weird platoon with Dusty's brain, for lack of it. I mean, it's not like there's no logical pattern for the way Maldonado is used versus Diaz at catcher. If you're going to play catcher, Diaz at DH, that's great, except you've now lost all of your flexibility if something does happen to Maldonado, which is a possibility, which is why we carried Salazar for most of the year, who never played. So it's just this Dusty and young players, is a really weird combination because he doesn't trust them until he does, unless he trusts you implicitly, which is why Corey Julks seems to get a lot of playing time. And he's busy keeping pocket calculators or cell phones or whatever he has in his back pocket that prevent him from running bases correctly. That's the only thing I can figure. Because what else could that be in that back pocket?
Brian, do you have a reply?
Jake Myers is one of the best defensive players on the team and brings value there. And, with Jordan out, your best lineup is Jake in center and Chaz in left, Yainer at DH with occasional Corey Julks.
Andy, do you have a response?
I mean, we will agree to disagree. Chaz should be an everyday player in center, and I will be willing to sacrifice the defense.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point when you're losing games 3-2, but Brian, you've also said before, I mean, to be fair, Brian, you said before that most defensive metrics are flawed in the way they're calculated.
I'm not going to say they're flawed. They are inconsistent, hard to measure, and often tell you different things. And so you could always have a grain of salt on them. I won't say they're flawed, but also, I mean, what's really flawed is, hey, I saw this guy make a great play, therefore I think he's a good defender. And the question is, did he make a great play because he was poorly positioned or he got a poor jump and made up or at the end, or did he get a great, did he go to the edge of the possible range? And the good news is we have better tools to measure that today than we ever have. Still, defense is confounding from a sabermetric standpoint.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, that's the Derek Bell situation. Derek Bell looked like a great outfielder because he took horrible routes to balls and had to dive for everything. Fortunately, he made a lot of those catches, but a better outfielder wouldn't have to make those plays look anything more than routine. I think Jake Myers can get 2 more balls than Chaz McCormick or Corey Julks. There's no argument there. I think he has whatever he has left on that shoulder. He plays a good center field. I just don't think his offensive deficiencies are enough to make up for the defensive pluses that he brings. Overall, Chaz is a better player than Jake Myers right now, and I'd rather have better players in the lineup that are struggling to score 3 runs a game. Yeah, this team is still a really, really good team record-wise if we score 4 runs a game. I mean, it's like a ridiculous record. Our problem is we don't score 4 runs a game a whole lot anymore.
Yeah, I have a feeling that seems like it's turning though. Brian, I mean, we did score. I mean, this is where we talk about the snake bit part of it. The pitching failed once the offense got going. I have to feel like eventually that stuff's going to line back up, and maybe it will happen against the jet-lagged Cardinals who are coming back from England, and maybe their luggage got lost. We can hope.
I mean, you tell me what jet lag is like. They're going to basically have to do what you did and, jump right into playing baseball after hanging out with eating tea and crumpets also doesn't seem really good for your baseball. So yes. More sort of notably, the Cardinals have been a bad baseball team this year, particularly in their starting rotation. And so you'd love to see the Astros take advantage of that, score some early runs, and get the hitting back on track. Certainly an easier task than it was facing the Dodgers pitching staff.
Well, and look, it's very easy again, to fall into the desire to look at things in a small sample size. And I'm not going to be throwing dirt on our friends to the north, but they've lost 3 straight. They're not scoring runs anymore. Are we starting to see some of these players on the Rangers that were overachieving maybe coming back to the pack a little bit, which I know, Brian, you felt very confident would eventually happen. So I'll let Andy answer first.
I don't care about the Rangers right now. We need to worry about ourselves. I know you want a better answer, but they're the team in first place. They're the team we're chasing. We have to make up 5.5 games or 5 games, whatever it is right now. We have 3 against them this weekend. So what I would like to see this week is getting some sort of consistency out of the 3 phases of baseball against a bad Cardinals team to go into Arlington and hopefully take 2 or 3 or all 3 against the Rangers. But until we get there, it's just we're chasing them right now, and it's a position that we haven't been in as a franchise in a number of years, chasing anybody. I still think we catch them at the end of the day. I still think we pass them up at the end of the day, but they've got a pretty good lead and they've played well. They've struggled a little bit. They're striking out a lot lately, where they weren't doing that earlier in the year. But the Astros have to start taking care of their own business. They have to start beating teams they're supposed to beat. I think part of the frustration that we're all feeling right now, beyond the overall, is it was against the Dodgers, and the Dodgers fans talk a lot of noise.
Yeah.
Twitter has been what it's been, and it was kind of amplified this weekend. And then you have a realistic shot of going 3-0 against that team, and instead you went 1-2.
It felt like that. It felt like that Yankee series from last season, where obviously the outcome was different, but it could have been a 4-game sweep.
Yeah. And that's I would love to get worked up about the Rangers right now. I just can't. I can't do that until we start playing better baseball on a consistent basis. I am hopeful that, we make it through these next 2 weeks. We get Alvarez back. We might get Brantley back. We're going to get Urquidy back. Hopefully there's some deals to augment some weaknesses on this team. And then you play the rest of July, rest of August and September for placement. This is still a playoff level team. We should be there at the end. But right now it's really, really frustrating. And it's, at times hard to watch, because I can tell you what I think in the 8th inning when I see Rafael Montero coming in with anybody on base, or even with a clean inning. It doesn't seem to matter. He manufactures losses right now. He's not the main reason for the record, but that bullpen is a big part of it.
Brian, any thought on the team in Southern Oklahoma?
Yeah, Andy and I disagreed earlier, but we're going to agree here. Not really concerned about them right now, because the Astros are playing poorly, and the only way they get back in the race is if they play better. They're completely and totally capable of that. They have the talent to do that. This is probably, in the long run, just a bad stretch in the season, and they will sort of correct themselves over the long run. But the long run's a long way off. I'm concerned about this series in St. Louis right now.
Okay, let's go through some rapid fire, some random people, and I'll start with Brian on this one. And look, it might just be because I'm enamored from having watched him hit a ball literally out of a ballpark, but the Astros did re-sign a familiar face. He has played well in his minor league career lately, as Andy found out when his wife. So Andy goes, "Wow, John Singleton's still alive," and his wife commented with his numbers. So do we think that she hasn't blocked you yet? Do we think Singleton actually makes some kind of an impact on this team, Brian?
My guess is probably not. He got called up to the Brewers and didn't really do a lot, but hey, it is worth a shot, right? The cost of this is very little. The chance that it could be useful is there. So from a cost benefit analysis, give it a shot. It's possible that Jose Abreu's problem is that he's not unbuttoned enough buttons and exposing enough of his chest. And
where's our analytics on that, Brian?
John Singleton's the major league record holder for fewest buttons buttoned. So maybe he can be a positive influence on Jose Abreu, and that's what's going to unlock him.
Maybe he needs that drag to slow his bat down just a little bit through the zone. Brian, Andy, do you think not the director of Boys in the Hood, but the other one is going to have an impact?
I think both the director of Boys in the Hood and our John Singleton will have the same impact on the Astros roster this year, and that is minimal. It's a fun story, and good for John Singleton for apparently turning his life around or getting rid of his demons or whatever he's had to do, because the last 7 years have been a lot of minor league trips and Mexican league trips,
independent leagues. Yeah.
I think he, served a purpose for the Milwaukee organization, and it felt like that call up was a thanks for your time. He got all of 29 at bats, so I don't know how much you can read at that. I think his career numbers suggest he's a really good AAA player. And he probably falls in that category these days of a quadruple A player, where He's really good in the minors. He's not a major league hitter. I don't know that he can catch up to major league fastballs, and never could hit breaking balls. And I don't want to get on his wife's bad side, because she was very polite to me when I pointed out that he was still alive, and she agreed that he was also
In
still
Texas.
alive. But yeah, he's not that he's not even motivation for Jose Abreu, who is, again, far down my list of current problems with the Astros.
Yeah, I saw both of you guys in separate Twitter threads pointing out the fact that Abreu has not been the problem for the better part of the last 2 weeks, and people don't want to listen to.
He's been a competent player for 30 days.
It's like that's not nothing. It's 1/3 of the season so far or something.
He can't play in the cold Houston Springs.
Yeah, of course. I mean, who can?
If he's
really
under 90, he can't play. It's got to get over 90.
I get it. All right. The Brantley news has seemed to have gone 180 degrees. It looks like now he's fast tracked to be okay. So, Andy, do you feel better about your forecast of Michael Brantley now with the current information?
I don't remember what my forecast was. I think that he will be replacing Corey Julks in the lineup in the roster at some point, probably post All-Star break right now. Whether that's the right move or not. The good news, it's a veteran bat. Whether he has any power anymore or not, he's still going to hit for average, one would assume, because that tool usually is the last one to go away. He provides leadership in the clubhouse, and that leadership on the field would be invaluable. And he's a left-handed bat in the lineup. So I'm all enthused if we actually see him, but certainly more enthused about seeing him on the roster than I was a month ago.
Does that seem like what the plan is, Andy, to you, that maybe now the team is looking to the All-Star break to just get everybody back and make a run, and hope that Alvarez has been swinging for a little while now, but he's not back yet? Is that where you think maybe it's going to happen?
One of the complaints I've seen on Twitter and heard on the radio is the Astros don't play with a sense of urgency, which is
how do you measure that?
It's silly, but I think organizationally they don't have a sense of urgency yet. And I think where that benefits the team and the players is that Yordan Alvarez is not going to be in an Astros uniform again until he is completely healed, because they're not going to rush him back. And I don't think Alvarez has the personality or even the sway in the clubhouse to be Altuve and say, look, I'm at 90%, I can play through it, which is part of what's going on with Jose Altuve right now. Now it's a heel, but there's a lot going on there. So I think we're going to be extra cautious.
He's the heel of Astros Twitter.
Well, but I think the team is going to be extra cautious with Alvarez because he is the future of the franchise. And when they start getting urgent is when they start pushing players to come back and play a little bit less than 100%. We are not seeing that yet. So I still think you're going to get a deal or two made, because I think you have to. But I think the plan right now is get Brantley back, get Alvarez back, see what you have, and hopefully have 2 weeks to figure out what you need, based on everything else that has happened in this season. I still think if there's a frontline bat, or even something better than Jake Myers or Corey Julks, they're going to try to pick him up, especially somebody who has flexibility to play first or DH or play any of the outfield positions.
Dubon's playing first. Brian, what do you think? Is that what your sense is, that this is let's get to the All-Star break and get running?
Yeah, there's still over half of the season left to play. It said front offices tend to think, and for good reason, in the long term. And certainly that's what we've seen as well from Dusty Baker, both in the lineups he's made and also his comments about giving rest days to guys, being cautious with injuries. And, they probably could have pulled Yordan the day he got injured, and would have been better off doing that. Those are the breaks sometimes.
Those are the breaks, and this is the break in the show. But guys, 100 episodes. We've had a World Series championship in that, and we've had Astros Twitter DFA, everybody. So we've seen everything already in these 100 shows. But thanks so much for riding with me, and here's to 100 more.
It is an absolute thrill and a joy to do this. One, because I get to talk about my favorite team, and two, I've gotten to be friends with both of you. So thank you, Jim, and thank you, Andy.
Oh, I have to say nice things now?
You have to say nice things now,
Sorry.
Andy.
We certainly had our fits and starts at the beginning of what this show was, and tried to fit some people in that didn't fit. And Brian's been the best addition we could have hoped for and asked for. I think that as I listen to other shows in our market, our niche is still going to be the most reasonable show that you could find about who the Astros are and what's actually going on the field. And so I appreciate being allowed to be a part of it.
Yeah, I think that's always the biggest compliment that I've seen from either the YouTube comments or just messages of thank you for having some bit of a reasonable take. So that is our episode for this week. We will be back soon, and may the force be with you.